Down sorry again, your friendly local constitutional coop in California. And another item in the news, not surprisingly, is now Congress is trying to pass a mandatory draft to get more people into the armed forces. And on like everything else, by the way, it looks good on the surface, but not when you know the real story. And I'm a classic example of that back in the day. When I was so stupid and ignorant, and I was at the head of the class, by the way, ignorant. I'm so stupid. I go at the age of 19, volunteering to the U.S. Marine Corps at the height of the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. Wow, learned a lot in school, didn't I? Well, actually, in some ways I did, but not in this way. Now I know what I know. It's astounding when you just stop and think about what's going on there. And you learn about our history and wars going back to at least the Spanish American War. And that, wow, and we're going to be talking about that. And again, with attitude and with authority. I don't make this stuff up. But back in the day, my mom and dad took me over to Fort Holabird on the way to Harris Island. Never made it. The sergeant looked up, took one look at me, and says, "If you lose your glasses, how will you know who to shoot?" Because I am pretty nearsighted. Was then, am now. And I didn't know the right answer then like I do today, to be sure, because after I've studied and found out about all the BS that you're going to learn about, nowadays I would have said, fine, no problem. Give me an M16, point me back to Washington, D.C., the White House, landslide, Lyndon Johnson, I'll take care of it. And the reason for this is following the events in Dealey Plaza, when they got rid of JFK, and for one of two big reasons. And the Vietnam War was one because he had just signed an executive order taking us out of Vietnam. And the first thing this bastard Johnson does, and this is on a Monday right after he was assassinated on a Friday, so the first workday, he creates an executive order putting us back in there, which I'm not even sure you can do that as commander in chief of the armed forces. But that's the way it went down. And Kennedy, for the record, also wanted to start printing United States notes, which is paper money to be sure, but non-interest bearing, like these fucking Federal Reserve notes. And that was the other thing he did, got him into trouble at Dealey Plaza. And history, how it worked out. We ended up in Vietnam. We still have Federal Reserve notes. We're getting ready maybe to go to digital bank, uh, you know, currency, not currency, but anyway, no more paper money, no more nothing. Well, it's called digital currency is what it's called, and we don't want to see that come either. But my goodness, you learn what goes on here, and it's absolutely astounding. Hold on just a second. Yeah, so we get back to the mandatory draft, and we had that back in the day. And in fact, I went through and somehow I got through I can't think of the word right now, but they subjected me to tests and this, that, and the other, and checked me out medically and all that. And they missed the fact that I was blind as a bat, and that's how I ended up over at Fort Holabird there and getting sent back home before my mom and dad ever got back to taking me. And back in the day, no cell phones. And they want to put it in again. And wow. And all these wars we've been in since, and they've been making it up as they go along because they need wars to keep them in business. You're going to learn a lot about that. Send me an email, youwinandcourt@gmail.com, and you'll learn about a trio of books, and maybe more than that, but a trio by Anthony C. Sutton called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, Wall Street and FDR. And by the way, just as it was 60 years ago, even when I was a little younger, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. There never was one. As far as I can tell, there were never any warheads anywhere near Havana, Cuba, but that's what they wanted the American people to think. But with what Sutton wrote, which I didn't know until a long time afterwards, was that we controlled that Russian government from the beginning. I'm pretty sure we're still in control of it today. So even though they're again there today, and we just sent a submarine or two to Cuba, I wouldn't look for a whole lot to happen one way or the other. It's just simply not in the cards here. because in all out war, I mean, even the bastard New York bankers probably don't want to see that because it's going to take everybody out of the mix and really cause some problems. But back in the day, and what happened, an interesting story about that is that old bubblehead, Eisenhower, and Khrushchev, which is how you say Khrushchev in Russian, were supposed to meet. Never happened because they shot down Francis Gary Powers May 1st, 1960, and that's a big deal. That's Labor Day at the time in the Soviet Union. And the meeting never happened. And the big deal about this is that we were technologically ahead of them at that time in the Soviet Union. And I would not be surprised if we still aren't ahead of them. That's an open question to be sure, but back in the day we were, and they didn't know how to shoot this spy plane down with Francis Gary Powers, but they ended up getting contacted by a worker at Atsugi Air Base in Japan, an American who evidently gave them enough information to be able to do that. And the interesting part is his name was Alec James Heidel. You don't know him by that name. You know him by his other name, Lee Harvey Oswald. Federal agent then, federal agent in Dealey Plaza, trying to prevent what happened there, not be involved in it. And that's a story for another day. But you see how these things work. And by the way, Oswald, as you know, was over there for quite a while. Married a Ukrainian woman who I think is still alive and married to someone else in New Jersey at this point in time. And gets back after a year and a half and wasn't even questioned, as far as I'm aware, by any federal agency. And you might have thought they would have had a lot of questions. But then again, if he was their agent all the time and working for them, what's the problem? So we don't know about that. So that's a little off track with what I'm saying here. But the American history with wars. And as you'll learn, for example, another good book, by the way, is JFK by Leroy Fletcher Prouty. Right man, right place, right time. And this is not about the events in Dealey Plaza. It's about the history leading up to it. And he was in a very high position in the Kennedy government back in the day and had access and knew a lot of history that they don't teach you when you're in school, about the war stuff. Because if they did that, and for example, you learned, let's see, where's a good one to pick? Because there's so much that goes on here. In fact, back in the day, at the end of the World War II, and it was winding down, and we didn't have to do a land invasion of Japan. They had a fire sale of military goods over there. And you probably know the name of the guy who got most of them. Ho Chi Man. We're setting up the Vietnam War in the 50s with France and in the 60s with us. Just how these bastards work. And the Korean War, another war that was never a war. I mean, it just goes on and on. And that's what we have to stop here. And we can do that, by the way, if we get our government back, our federated Republican form of government of defined and limited powers, where most of the power is in sovereign, independent states, and better yet, at the local county level, where we have a lot more control over it. It's a lot less expensive, and it's easier to fix. That sounds a lot more like original intent to me than the BS we have in Washington, D.C. these days. So that's why I've dedicated my life to doing this. And that's a brief history of our involvement and more. We'll talk more about it. And to learn more, send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com. And the materials you're going to get, which won't include these books or anything, but it will have excerpts from all of them. And you can look at that and see what the hell is going on. Back to the Spanish-American War. Remember the Maine to hell of Spain? Well, if you don't know, that war started because the battleship Maine got sunk. Spain didn't do it. Wasn't known at the time, technology being what it was, except to the McKinley administration, because it came out 20 odd years later, or a war, and they could put on there and take a look at the Maine. It imploded from the inside. Spain didn't do it, but that was a very convenient start to the American empire. Wow, and start learning about all that. And the fact that now we don't have, not only do we not have states, we have federal insular territorial possessions, and the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court know it. They know. And the next full term they get back in October, I think they're going to be going a lot further here and exposing all this crap to the American people, and trying to fix it as much as they can. And guys, I hope you tell the American people what you're doing and why. Be open about it when you come back. That's the best news we could have. And for example, you teach them, you come up there with abortion, you go up under the Ninth Amendment or Article 1, Section 10, hell with the Due Process Clause or the 14th Amendment. That doesn't work. It never has worked. They've never wanted it to work. Civil rights crap. Federal, regional, martial law rule. The sooner we get rid of all of that, the better. So I know I get going at times there. But that said, you'll learn a lot more on this very important subject. Send me an email, uwinandcourt@gmail.com. Remember to subscribe, like you, tell your friends, like the videos, get the word out. The sooner we all start working together, the quicker we put these bastards out of business. Thank you.